This is episode 171 of the Leadway Wealth Builders Podcast. Today, I'm interviewing Tommy Magill, who has mastered the build to rent strategy, and he's going to be telling us about how he got into real estate, how he made the switch from flipping houses into new builds, and what to look for if you're trying to buy land for a new build. So, if you haven't listened to this podcast before, my name is Chris Rickenbaugh, and this is the Leadway Wealth Builders Podcast, and we're available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Podbean, and Amazon. And if you want to follow me in my journey, I'm using this podcast to document my journey in real estate and business. And I'm bringing on higher level investors to be able to tell us how they did it and as well as their stories. So you can follow along on there and on Instagram and TikTok at chris.rickenbaugh. That's chris.rickenbach. You can follow me there for the tips and tricks that I'm learning as well as what I'm doing with my properties. So with that being said, let's hop into Tommy's interview. Tommy Magill, welcome to the Leadway Wealth Builders Podcast. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Tommy, so I've heard, you had a couple different meetups, and then we met at the Better Life conference, and I'm like, oh man, Tommy's kind of a pretty big deal here, doing a lot of new builds in the area right outside of Charlotte. And I thought, man, you would be a perfect guest for the podcast because through some of the other, interviews you've done and the meetups, you've talked about the build to rent strategy, but I wanted to bring you on and get to know you a little bit better. So, who is Tommy Magill, and give us a little bit of background on you and how you got into real estate?
Sure. Um, I went to architecture school for undergrad, and I really enjoyed the design aspect of architecture school. But once I graduated and sort of got into the real world, I realized that it's not as fluffy as that, and I'm not, designing buildings, and nor do people care what my thoughts are in design, and was essentially just labeling drawings for the first couple months of my career. But even before that, in school, I kind of made the decision that I didn't really want to be an architect in the classical sense of the definition of an architect. And I sort of within school kind of started to deviate from that. So even when I started my architecture career, I kind of knew that I was going to be somewhere else. And I even tried to get some jobs out of architecture school in New York City, working for developers. But none of those came to fruition. So I ended up just getting a job in Miami. I went to University of Miami and got a
Cool.
job in Miami with an architect. I worked for him for like 3 to 6 months, but going into it, I said, listen, I appreciate the job, but the reality is, I'll be using this, to make a living for, a period of time. And he said, look, I need the help now. I don't care, as many months as you can give to me. I appreciate it. And then, once you decide to move on, like, please help me fill your spot in other spots. I said, absolutely no problem. So worked for him for like 3 to 6 months, and then ended up getting a job with a real estate developer in Miami, and started working on high-rise construction. I was like an assistant project manager and basically worked in Miami for about 2.5 years. And my dream was always to live in New York, so I was continually looking for jobs in New York, and eventually ran into a guy who was from New York who was building down in Miami. And he said, anytime, we were in meetings together, and he was a pretty seasoned guy, and he said, anytime that you need, the leg up, you let me know. So I said, anytime you want to give me the leg up, I'm ready to go. So it happened to be about 2.5 years into my job in Miami. So moved up to New York, started working in construction, like New York City construction, as a project manager or assistant project manager. for a construction company. Um, did that for about 5 years. Loved it. Loved the camaraderie in construction. And then went and got my MBA in finance with like a concentration in real estate. Um, all this time I kind of had the sense that I was eventually going to be out on my own, running my own business.
Hmm.
But I wanted to get the education necessary to, sort of create a great foundation of success. You know, Looking back, I think it was a great decision, but unfortunately, I started significantly later than a lot of people, or maybe when I wanted. But I going into starting my own business 8 years ago, I was confident that I was going to be successful because I knew construction, I knew the financial aspect of it, I knew um, the the design side of it, not to the extent of a lot of things, but I knew a little bit of it. And then my final job, like W-2, was with this real estate developer in New York, company called Hines. Um, and it was just an amazing job. I learned so much in those 3 years that even bolstered the confidence to a level that, I really felt well prepared to move on to my own thing. So 8 years ago, 2017, um, I started Woodward Homes, which is my current company.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a pretty long journey because I know people have so many different stories about how they got into it, and it seemed like you wanted that ground level, like very grounded, great foundation to be able to start that business. Do you think that allowed you to scale much quicker than other people who have to go through all of the different trials, all of the different learning, and then once they kind of get it figured out? They're able to go forward, or do you feel like that foundation really allowed you to scale?
I would say that everybody's journey is unique. I meet so many people. A friend of mine, Cam, was a pastor before he started.
Oh yeah, I know Cam.
You
I'm in
know,
his mastermind.
yeah. So, he went from zero to like 100 deals a year in like 3 years. Um, I don't think that like I had the mental capabilities to do that, even with the foundation. Because one of the things that happened, what was unique, is that I transitioned from commercial to residential. I was building these, $100 million high rises, or $100 million like communities, and really didn't focus on the specifics of building a single home. And it was actually a humbling experience when I had to go into like the details of what it took to build a single house, as opposed to um, you know overseeing the construction of something that's significantly larger. So I really had to relearn how to build a home from the beginning, and that, I don't know if it impeded my um, progress as far as scaling, but um, it was certainly a humbling experience. I'll say that. So the one thing, I guess I looked at it differently, because when I went into it, I was of the mindset, and because I kind of was brought up in the bigger pocket world,
Hmm.
where like, Jay Scott and all these guys are like, oh, if you don't make, a home run on your first deal, it's not the end of the world. It's a learning process. And I always approached it as a learning process. So um, the scalability and the money really wasn't on top of mind when I first started out. Everything was really just about the education. So I still don't feel like I have the full education that I need, but every day I just try and get better a little bit every day. So that's kind of the way that I look at it. But like, I never wanted to scale to like, I shouldn't say that. initially I wanted to scale this massive company and just start spitting out homes. Um, and then I had two kids, and then I realized like my time is better spent in other places. And like at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, it's not going to make a difference, whether I'm worth, 10 million or, 100 million. Um, as long as my kids, are like additive to society as opposed to like taking away from it, then I feel like I've been a success, reg-
Gotcha. Yeah.
regardless of the money.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And so for people to know, what does your business look like currently? And then we can dive into kind of how you got there after leaving the
Sure.
W-2.
Currently, I do about 20 new builds a year. Half of them, minimum of half of them are built to rent. And then I'll sell between 5 and 10 of them. So I'll either sell 5 and keep 15 or sell 10 and keep 10. Um, and the rationale behind that is just um, I'm trying to build a passive income so that I can, not have to like go chase deals or go chase, um, the almighty dollar where it's just, coming in month to month, and I don't have to worry about, where my next paycheck comes from. Because in the beginning, I was flipping houses and I had to flip a house. I had to flip multiple houses in order to make enough money to survive, plus, be able to invest in other properties. So I really didn't like what that did to me as a human being, the stress levels. Like one month have like 5,000 in your account, the next month like 200,000. Just those emotional swings was a little too much. So I want something a little bit more consistent and, have like a nest egg and more conserve than, the thirst to go out and get, significantly more.
That makes sense. Yeah, definitely. I relate on the emotional swing since I'm in that first year and a half, going from, doing nothing to getting in to having a partnership breakup. Now I got to figure it out on my own, what I did wrong. And so I definitely understand you there on the fix and flips because it's definitely a toll on the emotional level.
For
But
sure.
how did you end up getting into the new builds and see how, like, when was the first one you did where you realize, oh, this is the way to go?
Yeah. So I got into it by, um, just trials and tribulations of the flipping world. I did the first year, I did 4 flips, um, and you know, made a good living, with those 4 flips. They were all, doubles and triples, they weren't like base hits that
Hmm.
I made good chunks of change on each one of them, between 30 and $50,000 a piece. So I was like, this is really great. I can, certainly live off this. Um, and then about 2 years into doing that, I read the book Traction,
Hmm.
and actually a year into it, and then read book Traction, and then 2 years into my business, I realized that I was just flipping. Like I had nothing to show for my company except for my time spent. So if somebody were to approach me and say, "Hey, I'd like to buy your company," they really would just be buying my time. So the genesis of the new builds really started with the ability to create an actual company rather than just a flipping business. So I started to buy rental properties, and I started to pack some rental properties away. Then, through, owning, maybe 15, 20 rental properties, I was like, if I could, build these properties myself, I would certainly reduce the maintenance for these properties as well as the capital expenditures. Like an HVAC went out on a quadplex that I owned up in Kannapolis, and then like 2 days later, another one went out. So like within a week, I'd spend, at the time it was probably $7,000, and then like that's, you know it was probably $200 a door. So was that $800, 8,000, that's almost a year's worth of cash flow in
Hmm.
1 second gone, So I was like, I want to try and, you know, get to a place where I'm not having to do this all the time. So um, a friend of mine, or he was actually a business partner, um, asked if I wanted to be a part of these three new builds that he was doing, and I said absolutely. So I essentially funded the construction you know, of the new builds while he, did the construction himself, and I was kind of like the silent partner financier of the properties. Um, and loved it. I just were it was so much cooler to me to taking land to get to a house than taking an old house and making it new.
Hmm.
So I just fell in love with it right then and there. So we created a partnership and just started building a bunch of new builds, and it was like we would keep some, sell some, and then then I kind of just went out on my own and just started doing it on my own. So just like a slow, very slow process over the years, but probably over the last 5 years, I'd say I've been doing new builds consistently. Obviously in the beginning started off slow, did like three, the next year did six, and then next,
Hmm.
just kept slowly and surely kind of like adding to it.
And you felt 20 was about the sweet spot.
Yeah, I mean, I always kind of had 20 in my head, even when I was flipping houses. Like, but to me, it was really just a number, and it still is just a number. Like, I don't need to, you know, do 20 a year. I honestly need to do like two a year,
Oh, wow.
in order to like have, like decent living, you know, and I can just roll it into doing like two or three the next year. Like, that's what I need to do to like take care of my family, not lose any of my savings, and
Hmm.
that's kind of like the break even on my costs, really. Um, but I want to build a company. I want to build a portfolio. I want to not have to go out and chase deals. So I'm actively looking all the time for new deals to do that 20 so that I can pack 10, 15 a year away, so that there's going to be a day in hopefully the near future, the next 5 to 10 years, where you know I don't have to you know contact 100 uh, wholesalers every 2 weeks to like try and strum up some deals, or scrub Facebook to look for people who are selling land, and
Hmm.
go out and door knock, and do all these things that like um, I could be doing other stuff too. And I'd also like to graduate. I've done the most I've done so far is four new builds in a row, like like kind of like a small subdivision development,
Okay.
whatever you want
Yeah.
to call
Yeah.
it. So I'd like to build on that, so where I'm not going out and doing 20 individual. I might be doing you know 20 in one development
Gotcha.
within.
Like a subdivision,
Yeah.
townhome type of environment.
Yeah, I mean, it would probably still be individual homes, but still, all kind of like in one place, as opposed to, you know, individual ones all over.
Gotcha. Yeah, that kind of you kind of answered the question there because it was how are you finding the lots and homes to tear down? And you said, wholesalers scrubbing Facebook, and I think that's where we all start. And building those relationships as you've done this since 2017, you've probably built pretty good relationships, but it's interesting that you're, you know, still having to do the same exact things somebody is, just starting out. Unless, are you doing your own marketing?
Yeah, yeah. So I do direct mail marketing. I do, like I pull lists on PropStream to scrub them down to like only the land that I want to build on. And
Hmm.
so then I'll go and door knock those. And then I do driving for dollars with Deal Machine, but I do it all myself. I do have a property manager who works for me who's like really great. She finds the tenants. She screens them. She handles all the maintenance with our handyman. So my main focus is just finding land. So I spend most of my time, going through wholesalers, doing direct mail, door knocking, and driving for dollars.
Gotcha. And then so say somebody is looking to get into new builds. It's kind of like asking for a friend because I'm kind of in the flipping, the wholesaling, and I know there's something bigger out there. And whether that's new builds because I'm already in the real estate space or buying businesses, it's really interesting to me how you're looking at them. And it only builds me as an investor, getting to ask these questions and bring on higher level investors like yourself. But if somebody was looking to do a new build or say, find one for you, what would they be looking for to see if it's a good deal or could work for a new build? Like
Yeah.
numbers, lot type, location, all of it.
Right. So I build exclusively in Gaston County, and I build from Belmont all the way to Bessemer City. Um, Obviously a lot in, I don't know if it's obvious, but a lot in Bessemer City has its own, uh, points or criteria to make it successful as opposed to a lot in Belmont.
Hmm.
You want to get one that, um, you know, I like to have at minimum 25% equity in the deal initially, so that if I were to sell it, I'm making 45 to $55,000 per build. So the way I'll just break down one in Bessemer
Yeah,
City.
yeah.
So most of the lots I buy in Bessemer City are between $15,000 and $20,000. Um, I have an incredible contractor, Slate, who um, will build for right around $100 to $115 a square foot. Like on the four that I did in a row, there's obviously economies of scale there to where I can build for less dollars per square foot because some of that price comes down because they're, one house right after the next. But like a single build Bessemer City, um, you're looking at like a 1,400 square foot house at $15,000 for the lot, 155,000 for the construction. The tap fees are around 7,000 to 7,500. Um, you have to get surveys and plot plans, which is like between 1,500 and 2,000. Your closing costs, on the purchase is probably around 1,200. On the sale, it's probably around 800. It gets a little lower. Um, Lending costs, that's important because depending on where the market is, you have to factor in what the cost per month is going to be now that things take 3 months to sell.
Hmm.
So all that has to be factored in. That's between $8,000 and $10,000 for the total cost of the project in lending costs. And then I like to throw in just like a miscellaneous, like maybe 5 to 10%, and it usually works out to be between 205 to 225,000 of cost, like just cost. And then, like realty fees, I have my real estate license. So, I give the buyer's agent 3%. So that works out to be on a $250,000 house, $7,500. So that all kind of works out to be, in that price range. And then, they sell between 250 to $275,000.
Gotcha.
So, if I'm into it for 205 and sells for 275, obviously that's a good deal. That's $70,000. And that's a little over 30% of my cost. If I'm up on the higher end, 225, obviously that number comes down to about, 45, 50,000. And that works out to be about, 25% return on investment. So
Gotcha.
that's kind of where it lays out for each deal.
That makes sense. And then these specific lots, like how big is a lot that you're needing to build on?
Um, so really, it depends. So if a lot, so I got a lot in Mount Holly not too long ago. It's the smallest lot that I've built on, but it was like I think 0.09 um, acres, but it had, it was big enough to where I could put the house. But one of the things you like typically you can't subdivide into 0.09 because it goes against all the zoning codes. But if you have a lot that already exists, it's grandfathered in. And then you just have to meet all the other requirements, like the setbacks and the um, but basically like the front side and back setbacks. So as long as you can do those, you can still build a house on it. So it's just a long-winded answer to say it doesn't really matter as long as you can put a house there on the
Gotcha.
size of the house, the size of the lot. And like if you can find a house that's 15 feet wide, like you can probably build on a lot that's 30 feet wide. So all that kind of like gets taken into account that it really doesn't matter as long as you can build one house on it. And then, the ideal lot has access to water and sewer. That's huge. Like, um, well and septic, there's too much variability to it for me to make it, unless there was so much fat on the deal to where I can, confidently put it in a well and septic and, regardless of the cost of it, I'm still going to make money. And I've never to this day done a well and septic on a new build because of that, because it's just like could be 7,500 for a well, it could be 20,000. You just don't know until you start doing the work, or you start wells until you start doing the work. But for septic, is it a gravity fall system, or are you going to have to pump it? And has a huge cost implication to the deal, which is why I stay away from it.
Now, is the city giving you that information to see if that lot is on city or you would have to do well or septic?
I can usually figure it out like going to the site. And I live in Gaston County, so I just go to the lots that I'm going to build on to figure it out. And I can easily figure it out if I'm there.
Yeah, that's nice. Investing in your own backyard. I mean, you're so close to everything. If there's ever problems, that's one of the things, I hear a lot of newer people talk about. It's like, wow, well, it's expensive here. I should go out of state, where, you're doing this in your own backyard. I've met, multiple different people who are doing, almost 100 new builds a year. And then all of you guys are packed into the same market. So it shows that, you don't have to be doing 100, you could be doing 20 or even less and making a really good living. So it's cool to see that big ecosystem. And then all you guys are friends, which
Yeah,
is which is fun to see, because I know
yeah.
yeah, like Stephanie Betters and her company, they're
Mhm.
doing 100 a year. Like they're killing
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Uh, Now, are you guys competing in the same market?
Um, to say that I'm competing with Better Path is kind of like just a silly statement to make. Like, they are, certainly the one who's like setting the bar, and I can just, if I can find, lots here and there, I'm happy with it. But yeah, they're certainly the juggernaut. And I don't really compete with them in the sense, like um, I've built across the street from them, and I actually got my builder um, because they were building. I was building two lots across the street from each other, and they were building two lots next to each other on one of the sides of the streets that I was building on. And Brent from Slate, basically saw, me building across the street from him and was like, "Hey, listen, I can probably do it faster and less expensive than you're paying right now. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Absolutely." And then, I kind of went to Jeff Johnson, who's a part of Better Path Homes, who has been, like an arm's length mentor to me from like day one. Just like gave me my, gave me traction, number one, gave me my business coach, number two, because they were using him. And, gave me like, I kind of like asked him like, hey, do you care if I use Slate too? And he's like, no, absolutely not. So, um, so I kind of got, uh, they helped me out, they being Jeff and Stephanie and, Zach. Uh, and, anytime I get a text from Jeff saying, hey, do you have an HVAC maintenance guy who can do something in Belmont, today? And I'm like, yeah, here's the guy, boom, boom, boom. So I try and, one hand washes the other. So I don't find to be in competition with them. I kind of like am of the mindset that like a rising tide lifts all buoys
Hmm.
type of idea, because I think that um, competition kind of has a negative connotation to it where I'd rather just have like a positive spin that like we're kind of all in this together. And, I certainly make an incredible living. They certainly make an incredible living. So um, I don't find to be in competition. But are
Yeah,
there
that's
times where like they've bought land that I've like put, an offer in on? I'm sure it's happened, but you know, it's just the way I'm okay with what I'm doing. They're okay with what they're doing. So I don't think it's really competition.
Yeah, that's so cool to see, and that's been one of the bigger things in the real estate community that I've seen. It's like everybody's working together.
Yeah.
Nobody's like really against. It's like we're all trying to do deals together. It's like, hey, I have a deal, you have a buyer, let's JV and do that. So that's
Yeah.
super cool to see. And I just have one quick question because I know you brought up coaches and mentors. How impactful has that been, for your learning and being able to grow a company and then do new builds?
I would say everybody's an individual. It probably was more helpful for other people than it was for me. I'm I'm I am kind of like a cynic when it comes to coaches and stuff,
Really?
like I'm really like over and maybe to a fault or probably to a fault, to where like um if I would just like let that wall down, I could probably work with coaches a little bit better, but um I'm just better on my own. And that I don't know if that's good to say or not. I don't mean on my
No,
own, like
yeah, I
on my
understand that.
own. I just mean like I would rather do it myself with the help of my friends than a help of a coach.
That makes sense. That
Like
makes
I
sense.
have incredible resources. I have weekly calls with, guys who are extremely successful in the real estate world. I'm a part of masterminds. That's kind of where I feel like the collective um, ideas of friends and other investors propels me further than like one guy kind of giving me the path. And the coach that I had, the funny thing is that the year that I hired him, I did 28 homes. So it probably is,
There's something to
helpful.
it.
Yeah, there might be something to it. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Tommy, you have been great. What is the best way to connect with you if somebody has a deal, if somebody's wanting to just pick your brain? I know you have a mass or you have a meetup as well. So, what's the best way to connect with you if somebody wanted to?
The best way really is to just direct message me on Facebook, um, which is my name, which is Tommy Magill. And I run the mastermind meeting, which is at Hawthorne's the second Thursday of every month at 6:30 p.m. The Hawthorne's off of Old Post Road. Those are the best ways to kind of like get in touch with me or like at least be a part of, that idea of thinking um, that we're kind of like all together in this. Um, but yeah, most of my deals go through Facebook Messenger.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's cool. I know we've had definitely some back and forth on there. I'm trying to get you one, but
Yeah.
um, That's awesome, Tommy. Thank you so much for giving your time today. And this has been Tommy and Chris on the Leadway Wealth Builders Podcast.